From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. So we got to talk a little bit about COVID. It's, man, this thing. The headlines, the stories, the controversies, the misinformation, disinformation, all of it spreads as fast or even faster than the virus itself. It's crazy. So let me just share a few thoughts I've had with you. Right now, you know, the whole big thing about Chicago and the Chicago schools being closed, the teachers said, no, we're not going back into the classroom. We have some conditions have to be met first. We will teach online. And then Chicago shut them down, said, no, if you're not coming in, school's closed. They locked them out of their online platforms. But I heard Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago making the argument about how kids have to be in school because their parents have to work. Now, this is a very common argument that you've heard thousands of times. When an argument or a line of thought gets accepted as a premise, that's when you really have to start questioning it. Question the premise. The next question should be, why? Why do people have to work? That's the problem, every bit as much as the virus is the problem. And Mayor Lightfoot went as far as to single out, because, she's a liberal, progressive, whatever. I don't know what to call people anymore, Democrat. Of course, she's very quick to point out, and who's hurt the most? Well, single parents, and especially single women, and especially single women of color. They don't have any choices. They have to go work, so they need their kids in public schools. Well, yes, she's right. She's right within this horrible system that we're all stuck in, but that's what we have to question. Because in a real sense, Mayor Lightfoot isn't defending that single woman of color. She's defending capitalism. She's defending the system that just assumes that every single adult has to be out working. And by working, that means in a job that pays wages that by definition brings profit to the owners. She's not defending these poor women, these poor parents. She's defending a system, a bad system. And yes, there's the world we live in and the world we want. But God Almighty, at some point, we have to start questioning the world we live in. No one should have to work. In a decent, civilized world, kids would be raised by their parents and the so-called village that raises kids. I mean, the capitalist model is that to have every single parent working full-time, and so therefore, by necessity, you have to institutionalize the children. They have to be in full-time daycare. That doesn't serve the parents. It doesn't serve the children. It only serves the capitalists. Now, you can take a deep dive into this, which we won't do today. You and I have talked about it before. The whole 50s model of the housewife who doesn't work outside the home, and she takes care of her husband and kids and house and all of that. I'm certainly not suggesting for a second that that was better or that we should somehow go back to that. But taken down to its basics, a parent should have the opportunity and the right to raise their own kid. If back in those sort of idyllic 50s and early 60s, it's often pointed out that one salary of just, a regular job, one salary could support a family and buy a house. And now it takes two salaries, two full-time salaries, just to barely get by. Forget about buying a house. Half the country or more can't do that. And if you do manage to do it, then you're in hock up to your ears and you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're juggling all your debts. Well, I don't want to go down that big rabbit hole today. The point I'm making is question the premise as it regards COVID. Let's stay on the topic here. Mayor Lightfoot isn't defending poor single women of color who have to work. No, she's defending capitalism. And it's time we recognize that and do something about it. If I hear the word normal again, I'm going to just start throwing things. We don't want to go back to normal. Are you kidding me? Normal got us here. Normal is capitalist oppression. Normal is millions of children being hungry. Now, we just lost the child tax credit, wasn't renewed because of Joe Manchin. So those same kids are going to go back to being hungry again. The very idea that we want to go back to the pre-COVID normal, even if we could eradicate the virus, which we can't, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Even if we could, let's even, just assuming that we could eradicate it, or what they're calling now learn to live with it, which is just driving me insane. 1,600 people a day are dying. That's the rolling average in Europe and the US. 1,600 people every single goddamn day. And we're not out of this. I don't know when we're going to be out of it. Different experts will say different things. We got another really tough 4 weeks or a really tough 8 weeks ahead of us. And some places have peaked. Of course, the waves roll around the country. So if they seem to have leveled in New York right now, that might not be the case in Milwaukee, right? Different places are going to peak at different times. So we're just in the thick of this thing. And people just are obsessed with, quote, getting back to normal. Well, it's going to be a long, long time until we could get back to normal. And even if and when we could, I don't want to go back to normal. I want to learn the lessons of this. And I want to be ready for the next pandemic. Pre-COVID normal. Give me a break. Yeah, I want to go back to rampant overconsumption. Including, by the way, and I have to say this, somebody has to say this out loud, food and liquor. Why the hell have we become so obsessed over the last few decades with restaurants and bars? We just have to be out there. We just have to be eating out all the time. Now, again, I'm going to remind myself as I'm ranting here, these are systemic problems. It reminds me of the whole environment thing. Everybody recycle and turn your lights off and everything will be fine. Of course, that's a joke. The problems are systemic. Well, if I tell you, well, don't eat out so much and don't feel like you have to be entertained at the bar every night, if I ask you to take personal responsibility, if I become sort of a prude, some kind of a moralist, like, why are you out drinking? I don't want to do that. No, these are systemic problems. And what's happened is, for economic reasons, this model of everybody working, every adult, full-time. You can't take care of your house. You can't take care of your kids. And along with that, you can't grocery shop because now you have to have it delivered to you if you have any food in your house at all. You can't grocery shop. You can't plan and prepare meals. You can't do all things that the 50s housewife did. Well, there's no reason in the world we couldn't. Again, systemic, capitalist exploiting us. It doesn't have to, you don't, toss gender out of it. One salary could support an entire family, including a parent who stayed home. So if there was any justice in the world, that would still be the case. And every family, whatever their makeup, again, this is completely contemporary. I'm not hearkening back to any kind of gender roles or cis hetero specific stuff. No, not at all. Whatever your family is, you guys can decide. All right, you know what? I like to stay home and do the cooking and cleaning. It's fun for me. You go out into the world and do the work out there. I don't like that so much. Okay, that might be your choice. Or maybe you go 50-50. Everybody works 20 hours a week or 15 hours a week instead of 30 or 40. So these are the underlying problems of COVID. This de facto mandatory full-time work for everybody, for every single adult, and the full-time institutionalized daycare for every child virtually from birth. This is not okay. It was never okay. And now COVID is just highlighting that in ways that some people never imagined. Like they're seeing this for the first time. Oh, well, some people have a hard time affording daycare? Who knew? I mean, screw the economy. Every time you hear someone argue for, quote, the economy, just in place of that word, insert capitalist interests in their class war against workers. So, example, if somebody says, well, having the kids locked out of school because of COVID is bad for the economy. So you replace it. Well, having the kids locked out of school is bad for the capitalist interests in the class war against workers. Now, I know. Every researcher, every social scientist, everybody, it's a consensus. Everybody's telling us the kids should be in school. It's better for them in every way. Okay, all right, I'm not arguing that. All I'm saying is we're in a goddamn emergency right now. And if we lived in a world with any kind of justice or equity, we could handle that temporary emergency and we could all get on it. And if the kids indeed were forced to not go to their physical school for a little while, well, there'd be plenty of parents and other kids in their neighborhoods, and they could watch out for each other and take care of each other and organize in ways that we don't even consider now. Again, every problem, and this is the point I'm making, every individual little nuanced problem seems insurmountable because we don't question the premise. If there was economic justice, if people could choose their own way of working, of contributing, if the capitalists hadn't won the day and devised this system forced upon us that requires every single adult, every single parent to work outside the home, with a very few exceptions of the well-off. I'm not talking about them. Some people are doing great. I'm not talking about them. So screw the economy. It's amazing when I hear public health professionals, researchers, scientists, even they are buying in. They'll all say things like, well, we have to balance between our economic needs and our health needs. No, we don't. What are you talking about? There's no balance. No. First, let's not die, okay? There's no balance. There's only a balance if you don't question the premise of oppressive capitalism. You know, only 16% of kids 5 to 11 are vaccinated right now. And I'm not even sure if that's fully vaccinated. But let's assume the best, okay? 16% of kids 5 to 11 are fully vaccinated. That's assuming the best, because that number might mean just one vaccination. That's inexcusable. Come on, parents, what are you doing? Hundreds and hundreds of children are really very, very gravely ill, and many are dying. Only 53% of kids 12 to 17 are fully vaccinated. Parents, what the hell? It's absolutely time for vaccine mandates. I don't care. Opponents, take it to court all you want. We got to fight for this. Kids are already mandated for vaccinations. There's a whole list. Just add COVID to the list. That's the very least we could and should do. Add COVID to the list of vaccines that are already mandated for students in public schools. Yeah, the case for vaccine mandates is strong. You may remember I talked about it a year or more ago, and I've said it several times since, that I really wasn't for mandates. Yeah, it's one thing to make laws. You got to stop at a stop sign. Don't murder people. Okay, that I get. But requiring by law that you take a particular medicine in your arm with a needle, that seemed weird to me. But I've changed my mind. I think the time has come for vaccine mandates because we've seen now, we've had about a year of availability to the vaccine, and that's plenty enough time to see that, well, some people just aren't going to do it. And we have to force them. If everybody stopped at stop signs, we wouldn't have to have a law. If there was no such thing as murder, if nobody ever murdered anybody, we wouldn't need laws about murder. If everybody got vaccinated, we wouldn't need to have mandates, but we do. We've had a year to see this. Well, okay, too many people aren't doing this. We wouldn't be anywhere near where we are if everybody had just cooperated. This whole thing is entirely driven by those who refuse to get vaccinated, refuse to wear masks, refuse to social distance. They're just out there living their lives and carrying this thing around. So many millions of people just don't care. No mask, no vaccine, no social distancing, never tested. So this entire thing is driven by those people. And this learn to live with it. Are you kidding me? Come on. Learn to live with it means, well, currently, 1,600 people a day dying. Is that okay with you? Just for the pleasure and convenience and necessity, if it is. I think I interrupted myself earlier. I was going to rant on restaurants and bars. You know, we've seen the graph, right, of the number of cases just shooting up on a vertical line off the graph. Well, that's what's happened with bars and restaurants the last few years. You can't turn around without running into another one. We're so obsessed with being entertained and being fed and being lubricated. Well, I guess I interrupted myself earlier for the same reason I'm interrupting myself now. That's another topic. It's a bigger one, I suppose. But it just fits in generally with what I'm talking about. This problem, and it is a huge problem, this damned pandemic, it's every bit as much about or more about capitalism and unquestioned premises than it is about any virus. I mean, look at the inequity of the people who are getting sick and dying. Some jobs can be done from home, some jobs can't. And the ones that can't are largely very sort of low income, blue collar, restaurants, bars, manufacturing, food growers and processors. You know, we hear all the time about the meat industry, the meat packers. And all these jobs that you can't do from home, and they're being forced to go back. They're being forced with this decision that nobody should have to make. Well, do I put my health at risk and the health of my family? Because nobody's masked up in these big old warehouses. They're supposed to be. There's a policy, but I saw one woman quoted in an article I was reading earlier today. 200 people she approximated in this warehouse where she was working, and she counted maybe 10 or 12 who were masked properly. Most of them weren't masked at all, or they were wearing them under their chin. So, no, we're not going to learn to live with this. There is no balance between the economy and public health. All of this kind of thinking requires us to completely accept the power relationship between regular folks, workers, and the capitalists. The problem is more capitalist than COVID. Some good news out there. Scientists in Texas have developed a vaccine of their own, and they're offering it free to the world, which again, vaccines were developed over a year ago. Private companies withholding the recipe, controlling distribution. I'm always just aghast when I read phrases like, well, the government is negotiating with Pfizer. Negotiating? You don't negotiate with an extortionist. It's criminal what Big Pharma has done. The inequity of vaccinations around the world is the greatest crime I can imagine. And see, that's the thing. There is good news, but it only highlights the terrible failures. Yeah, these scientists have independently developed a vaccine, and they're offering it free to the world, Jonas Salk style. Good for you. It only highlights the criminal behavior of those preceding you. And there's lots of good news if you look at it that way. There are new developments in treatment, but treatment for who? I mean, treatment for those who can afford it. Rich individuals, rich nations. Omicron happened because we gave the virus opportunities to mutate. And the next mutation will knock us on our butts again, unless we do something about this. And Europe and the US have high rates because they have high rates of people who refuse to get vaccinated, refuse to act responsibly, and at the same time, absolutely insist on mingling freely, unmasked, at bars, restaurants, stores, stadiums, wherever they want to go. Because we have this maniacal consumption culture designed and fueled by the capitalists and accepted unquestioningly by the masses. Now, just in the last few days here, I think was it late last week? A group of former Biden administration advisors got together, put out a series of articles calling for a new COVID strategy. Now, I've been all over the map regarding Joe Biden. I think he's been intimidated by the anti-vax crowd, and especially by the anti-lockdown crowd. There is no appetite at all for any kind of a lockdown. That's never going to happen again if the numbers, no matter how the numbers skyrocket. And we're seeing it as we speak right now, because the numbers are skyrocketing. I hope to God we plateau at 1,600 deaths per day and start going down from here, but I don't know if that's the case. And CDC criticism, I think, has been deserved. It's kind of like the notion of self-censorship when you're so concerned about how your message is going to be received that your message just becomes so convoluted. That's kind of what I'm getting from the CDC and from Joe Biden and even from people like Fauci. They're always couching their language and, well, it depends on the individual and it's a case-by-case thing. And with each school district, they should decide, and each business should. And, of course, this is just recommended protocols. They're not mandated or required. They're just so afraid. They're so afraid of the very, very loud anti-vax, anti-lockdown, COVID is a hoax. That whole crowd has just gotten so loud and powerful that the administration and the CDC appear to be acquiescing to their expectations. So back to these 6 former health advisors. Let's see, reading, what am I looking at? Washington Post. 6 former health advisors to President Biden's transition team released a series of journal articles on Thursday. Okay, so that's Thursday of last week, calling for a new normal in the nation's approach to fighting the coronavirus and other viral threats. Okay, so they used the term new normal. I said before, no, please. But let's see. What I have read about this, there is some sense to it. For instance, they urged the administration to create a modern data infrastructure that would offer real-time information on the spread of the coronavirus and other potential threats, saying inadequate surveillance continues to put American lives and society at risk. They also suggest investments in tests, vaccines, and prevention beyond what the White House has done, such as mailing vouchers to Americans that could be used to obtain free, high-quality face masks. We're trying to take the next steps to anticipate where we need to be in the next 3 to 12 months, said Ezekiel Emanuel, the University of Pennsylvania bioethicist who coordinated the effort. Rather than continuing in a perpetual state of emergency, he and the others argue that the United States must shift to a strategy of seeking to live with the virus by suppressing its peaks rather than attempting to eliminate it. Now, see, that I can get behind that. I'm not saying we all have to isolate in our own little cocoon until the thing is totally eradicated. No, I understand that we do have to, quote unquote, live with this, but I'm not going to live with 1,600 deaths a day. And I hope you aren't either. I hope we haven't gotten to a point where that's just okay, where we can just put that out of our minds. That's not okay. We got to get this to a level where we can manage it. I understand that. I don't want to be in a perpetual state of emergency either. But can we be in a state of emergency while we're in a state of emergency? As Rappaport said, don't blame me for being outraged at that which is outrageous. The White House response to this series of papers and suggestions: right now, our approach is to continue to press for what we know has worked to date, which is to get people more vaccinated, get people boosted, and wear masks when recommended by the CDC. The advisors also called on the federal government to help phase in new vaccines that target specific variants, a step that vaccine makers have explored, but that the White House has so far suggested is unnecessary. The authors also called for a coronavirus vaccine mandate for school children. Yes. These advisors also rebuked the CDC over its messaging. Yeah, and it's different from the Orange Menace days. In those days, it was political. They were couching their statements or revising or literally lying in the service of the Orange Menace at his instruction. The CDC now is, as I said earlier, just bending over backwards to please everybody. God forbid you offend anybody. They're trying to play this middle of the road, pure Biden, right? Pure centrist Biden, middle of the road messaging about the balance between public health and the economy. Come on, you're the CDC. Let other people worry about the economy. Tell me about public health. That's all I want to know from you. So don't couch it. Don't water it down. Don't muddle it up. And then finally, the advisors are very clear about how the White House should more aggressively help to vaccinate the world, which so many public health experts have just been pleading since the beginning of this thing. As soon as vaccines were available, get them to the world. The virus knows no borders. Little has been done to tamp down the risk of virus variants emerging abroad. And that's really my biggest fear. What's the next variant? And how are we preparing for that? The Biden administration also has been widely criticized for failing to move faster to acquire and distribute hundreds of millions of rapid coronavirus tests, passing on opportunities last year to do so. So I would hope that the administration and state governors and legislatures, anybody with any power to do anything, will take a look at this release, A National Strategy for the New Normal of Life with COVID, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA. And this whole so-called new normal, or the two phrases that are killing me, new normal and learning to live with it. I understand that we want to feel like we're living normal lives. My only warning is, please don't hearken back to the previous normal where we all accepted our own oppression. And please, let's learn the lessons that COVID is revealing about the gross inequities and power structure of this nation. Okay? So that's what I'm worried about when we use the word normal. Yeah, in the colloquial sense, sure. I want to get up and feel like everything's normal. But we can't let that mean that we're blind to our own oppression. I don't want that normal ever again. And the other phrase that just drives me up the wall, learning to live with it. I understand the idea, of course. We've learned to live with the flu every year. People die, people get sick, things happen, bad things happen in the world. We can't just shut everything down. Yes, we have to learn to live with bad things. But I refuse to learn to live with conditions that are unacceptable. Yeah, we're going to get a cold once in a while. Nobody can do anything about that. And yes, very sadly, some people are going to get cancer. Science hasn't quite figured out how to beat that yet. But when a disproportionate number of people of low income, of poverty, lack of opportunity, if those are the people getting cancer, and if those are people dying of the flu, then no, I'm not going to learn to live with it. It's the exact same problem as quote-unquote normal. If I'm required to accept the conditions of capitalist oppression as an entry fee into normal, as a prerequisite mindset that allows me to, quote, learn to live with it, then no, I want nothing to do with that. I don't want normal. I don't want to learn to live with it if it means capitalist oppression continues to make all the rules and to drive the agenda going forward. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.